Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner. You're listening to the podcast on this Tuesday morning ahead of Arsenal's big Champions League clash with Atletico Madrid. Really looking forward to this game. I really am. And, you know, people say to me, well, it's only a league phase game and it doesn't really matter and all the rest of it. And that because of the format of the Champions League these days, because of the way that it works, because of the volume of fixtures that you play in this league phase, actually, you know, losing a game, it's kind of not the end of the world. It's kind of neither here nor there. You've got enough time to recover. And because so many teams progress and so many teams get through to the next round, actually, you know, we should go into these games a little bit more relaxed than we normally do. We should go into these games a little bit more chilled than we normally are. I don't really see it like that. I feel like if you can get the job done as early as possible, there is a huge benefit to that. Or if you can at least put yourself into a position where you're on your way through, I think that's hugely beneficial when you get to the back end of the league phase. Because, you know, we keep talking about rotation and we keep talking about changing things up and keeping people fresh. And I'd actually argue that you're better off playing as close to your best team as you feel is necessary in this early stage of the competition. And then when you get to the back end of the league phase, if you've pretty much done the job, you can take a bit more of a risk and a bit more of a gamble in terms of who you select and all the rest of it. I think there's this weird sort of belief among some that in the Champions League you can rotate and it's absolutely fine. Well, no, this is Europe's elite competition. This is Europe's premier competition, and actually to rotate in it is a risk. And I think there are certain games where you'll get away with it. For example, I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more rotation against Prague. I didn't mind seeing a bit of rotation against Olympiacos. I don't want to see too much rotation tonight against Atleti because I think they're a really good side with the potential to make life very difficult for us. So what are we doing on today's pod? We're going to clear up the shower story, shower gate, if you want to call it that. We're going to react to Mikel Arteta's press conference. We're going to pick up on some comments that Mikel Merino made. We're also going to talk a little bit about Atleti and what to expect tonight. I'll share with you guys my preferred lineup, and of course we'll do a prediction towards the end of the pod. A big hello to everybody, by the way, who is with us in the live chat right now. Mr. Wesbird is celebrating his 65th birthday today. Happy birthday to you, sir. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope that Arsenal give you the victory that you deserve. And as I say, I'm looking forward to this one. I'm excited about it because when one of European football's big boys comes to town, I think you should always enjoy it. I think you should always be excited about it. I think this is why ultimately you want to be in the Champions League, isn't it? And you don't want to be, with all due respect, in the Europa League if you're a club like ours. And you don't want to be in the Conference League because you want these glamorous fixtures. And while we've got 6 points out of 6, which is a fantastic and really strong start to the competition, we've played Athletic Club, who are a very good side in their own right. And San Mamés is a very difficult place to go. But they're not Atletico Madrid, you know, and we've played Olympiacos, who again are a very stubborn side and, you know, who some people thought we were going to wipe the floor with. That wasn't the case. We beat them, played pretty well on the night, I thought, but we only beat them by a couple of goals. So you look at the games that we've had so far and you'd say they're not the glamorized that you can get in the Champions League. They're not the ones that get you really excited. They're not the games that see you scrambling around for an Emirates Stadium ticket. This one is that. And it's our first one really of the season. And it's a good examination. It's a good opportunity to see where Arsenal are at, because what we've heard quite a bit of and what's been discussed quite a lot is, you know, Arsenal now are a side that are better equipped to break down the low blocks, something that we've had problems with in recent years. Well, let me tell you this. You are not going to face a more stubborn, a more organized, and a better drilled low block than one that is set up by Diego Simeone. So this is a good opportunity to see if we've learned how we've sort of adapted to dealing with that particular issue. And yeah, let's see how it goes. Look, let's start breaking it all down. Let's start working our way through today's pod. Let's just quickly remind you guys, if you haven't done so already and you're with us live on YouTube right now, please leave a like on the video. That really, really does help. And make sure that you are subscribed to the channel as well. If you'd like to check us out on Patreon, you can do so, patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description below. And tomorrow, when we react to the Atletico game, there will be a bonus exclusive bit of Patreon content, which is exclusively available to those that are signed up. So if you want to get in ahead of that, the link is in the description below. Come and join us. It's less than the price of a cup of coffee. And not only do you get access to our exclusive and additional bonus content, whatever you want to call it, you also get access to every single episode that we make completely ad-free, as well as being a part of the Chronicles of Aguna patron chat. If you're wondering why I'm looking at my phone a lot in this first 6 minutes or so of the show, I basically sat down this morning and I prepped for today's pod. And I wrote a whole A4 page of notes, things I wanted to discuss, things I wanted to cover, quotes from the press conference that I thought were worth raising. And so I've come down to the office. I've hit the go live button. And as the intro for the podcast was running, I'm looking right and I'm looking left. And where the hell are my notes? I've left them on the dining table. So I've been texting my wife and trying to get her attention, because my wife, right, when you really want her, will never, ever have the phone to hand. So I've texted her a couple of times, and then I've rang her phone to make her go over to her phone. And then I've sent exclamation marks just to kind of highlight the previous message I've sent. And she's very kindly sent me a picture of my notes, so I don't have to run back across the garden into the house, leave you guys hanging, and come back. So that's why I'm looking down at my phone a little bit more today. But look, let's begin with the shower story, because I read this last night, and I got to be honest, I found it quite funny. Like, it was just one of those stories that you could never have predicted in a million years. The story was that Atletico Madrid had come to Emirates Stadium. They'd had their training session on the pitch the night before the game, as is customary in the Champions League. And when they went to shower, there was no hot water. They were very unhappy about it. They were furious about it. Blah, 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 blah. There was a big story in Marca about it. And basically, it was packaged up as if this was some deliberate sabotage by Arsenal. And then I've seen people online taking that story and kind of running with it. And some Arsenal fans love it, and they're going, oh, this is brilliant. This is exactly the type of thing we should be doing to gain some sort of advantage. I've seen others saying, oh, this is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. Look, I've been told categorically that this was nothing more than just a plumbing problem. A plumbing problem that was raised to the stadium staff, that was worked on very, very quickly. And it wasn't just Arsenal's dressing room, Atletico's dressing room, I beg your pardon, that was without hot water. This was a problem across both dressing rooms. So Atletico Madrid raised the issue. Arsenal said they'll deal with it. Atletico Madrid's training session was due to end at 7:30 p.m. And the issue was resolved before that. However, for whatever reason, Atletico Madrid decided to wrap up their training session early and headed back to their hotels for showers. Now, it's not really that big a bloody deal, is it? Like, if you have to just put your tracksuit back on after what sounds like it was a really light session, by the way, because they didn't even finish it. They didn't even train for the entire duration of what they were scheduled to train for. So if you have a light session, you stick on your jacket and your tracksuit, and you make your way back to some very, very fancy high-end hotel in London and have a shower there. I mean, these are real sort of rich people problems, aren't they? Like, it's just, for me, it's not that big a deal. But Atletico was said to be furious about it. Arsenal apologized, but did resolve the issue in time for when they said they would. And that was the time that Atleti were due to end their training session. So this is not sabotage. This is not Arsenal trying to be clever. This is not anything deliberate. This was just simply a plumbing issue. And everybody knows that they can happen. So get off your high horses at Atletico Madrid, stop whining about it, and get on with it. If there's one club in Europe, though, that I'd expect to make a massive deal out of this, and led by one man in particular, it would be Atletico Madrid, led by Diego Simeone. Is he using it as a bit of fuel? Is he trying to wind up the players? Look, you came here and they didn't even give you hot water to shower. Now go out there and do your jobs. Is he trying to utilize a situation that was just an unfortunate one and nothing more to try and galvanize his players and galvanize his group? Maybe. I wouldn't put it past Diego Simeone, but Arsenal were not deliberately seeking to sabotage Atletico Madrid. Arsenal just had a plumbing issue, man, and it happens. It happens. Anyway, let's move on from that because I think it's amazing how big a story that seemed to become over the course of the night, and it really is a non-story. Okay, let's talk press conference because Mikel Arteta was faced with the media yesterday at the Sober Realty Training Center. Before you all start in the comments saying, Harry, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that? I wasn't there yesterday. I was working. I was covering on TalkSport 2 yesterday. I normally do Fridays, but I was in yesterday. And so I'm not doing Friday this week. And that is because I've got a commentary game on Friday night from the Serie A. So I had to change and juggle my week around a little bit. So I couldn't attend the press conference yesterday. So there is no question from me before you start asking me why I didn't ask X, Y, or Z. But obviously watched it back. Thought there was some interesting points in there. Mikel Arteta was very, very complimentary of his counterpart this evening, Diego Simeone. And why wouldn't he be? He's done an unbelievable job at Atleti. Just to compete with Real Madrid and Barcelona the way that he has over the years and elevate Atletico Madrid by constantly being in the Champions League, by going far in the Champions League, by bringing more and more eyes on the club, to essentially get them into a position where financially they're on a different planet to where they were in the past and prior to his arrival. That speaks to the growth that club has experienced under Simeone's management. If I was an Atleti fan, board member, he's someone that would have a job for life as far as I'm concerned. I've always admired Simeone. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't particularly relate to his style of football, don't particularly enjoy it. They've been labeled as the biggest S houses in football. We've heard that many, many times. I just think that when you are going up against Real Madrid and Barcelona in their pomp, and when you're trying to compete, against the very best sides, and maybe you're not quite as well resourced. I'm not saying they're not a well resourced club. They have been in recent years. But when you're on your way up that ladder and you're sort of climbing that ladder, you have to find a way of being competitive. And that's the way that Diego Simeone's chosen to go about it. It's effective. People say that their games are boring. I've actually found a lot of the games that they've played against the bigger sides where they've adopted those tactics actually quite entertaining for very, very different reasons, but entertaining nonetheless. So I don't really have a problem with the style or anything like that. Mikel Arteta was also asked about William Saliba, who was pictured watching Atletico Madrid play Osasuna at the weekend. And this was on the bus on the way back from the victory at Fulham at the weekend. And Mikel Arteta was asked sort of something along the lines of whether this was something that he'd put the players up to. And he sort of alluded to the fact that, no, this was something that William Saliba did off of his own back. This was something that the players sort of have done based on their own initiative. And that's great, man, because it shows you how focused they are. It shows you how keen they are to learn, to understand the opposition that they're coming up against just a few days later, and to try and identify and spot a couple of bits and pieces that might help them and might aid them in getting the result that they want to get. So, yeah, that's really encouraging to hear. He was also asked about Gabriel Heinze, who we've seen some interesting clips of, haven't we, since he first arrived at Arsenal. Now, we knew that he and Mikel Arteta were very, very good friends. And this is a friendship that, from what I understand, goes right back to their days as players at Paris Saint-Germain. So there's a good relationship. There's a good bond there. When Gabriel Heinze was brought in, there was a part of me that was like, what, that guy that I really disliked when he played for Manchester United, what is he doing here? And I didn't really warm to the idea, but you can see just based on the video that we have access to and the sort of content that we have access to, that he's incredibly passionate, that he's incredibly vocal, charismatic, He's a huge, huge character. And I think that is the type of thing that Mikel Arteta has built a culture, I think, that actually embraces and brings in. I mean, you think about some of the charismatic players we have in terms of the passion and all the rest of it. I mean, Gabriel, Big Gabby at the back, is the best example of this. Someone whose passion is just so clear for everybody in the world to see. I think, Gabriel Heinze has been embraced and been welcomed into the kind of Arsenal family. And it sounds like, from what Mikel Arteta was saying yesterday, the players quite like him and there's a really good and strong bond there. And if he can bring something different, and obviously, we've had to make changes to the coaching staff when people have departed, when people have gone on to take on different jobs. This feels like a good person to have. Mikel Merino was the player that was put up by Arsenal to speak to the media, and I suspect there's a good chance he plays as a result of him being put up. I don't think you put someone up that you don't have an intention of playing, just my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if he was left out of the starting 11, but I think he probably plays. And he was very, very complimentary of Mikel Arteta, among other things, in this press conference. He said, "We're lucky because we have one of the best, if not the best coach in the world, not only tactically, but in managing the dressing room." Now, that is really, really high praise indeed for Mikel Arteta. And listen, Merino is his man, right? Well, from what we understand and from what we heard previously, Mikel Arteta really fought hard to convince Arsenal to sign Mikel Merino because his age profile and the price that Real Sociedad were asking at that time, it didn't really fall in line with what Edu at the time and Arsenal felt their wider and bigger strategy was. In the end, Mikel Arteta got his way and he got his player in and he uses him in a very interesting way. There are some games where he picks him from the start. There are a lot of games where he doesn't feel he's the right option from the start, but he's trusting Mikel Merino. And we talked about him on a bonus episode of the pod just about a week or so ago. Is clear for everybody to see. There's an interesting point in the chat about Merino, and Clark says hopefully Merino plays as a striker. Look, Mikel Merino was an emergency striker. I don't think it's a position that Mikel Arteta in an ideal world would want to play him in. And I also don't think that dropping Victor Gyökeres to play Mikel Merino, unless you're really, really clear in your explanation that this is just because you need a breather and because you need a rest, I don't think that would chime particularly well with our big summer signing. Also, on top of that, when you are going through a run like Victor Gyökeres is, where you're having okay games, you're helping the team in some ways, but you're not scoring the goals that essentially, and let's not dance around it, that you were brought into the club to score. Actually, playing games is the only way that you're going to get through it. Playing games, having the opportunities to score. If Victor Gyökeres scores tonight in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid, considered one of the best defensive teams on the continent for the best part of a decade now, that's not just a goal, that's a confidence boost. And so I'd be very, very, very surprised if Victor Gyökeres was to be left out of the side for Mikel Merino to play up front tonight. We'll come on to my lineup in a bit. I think Merino plays, but I don't think he plays at centre forward. If we move on, I've covered Merino's comments about the manager. He's going to say that to a point, isn't he? But listen, there is clearly a lot of trust and a lot of faith in Mikel Arteta from within the group. And sometimes as fans, we look at it from the outside in and we go, well, is he getting this right? Is he getting that right? Blah, blah. And I'm sure the players have moments like that when it comes to individual decisions and certain things that the manager chooses to go with. But ultimately, I really do believe that, they're behind him. The players are behind him. And so we should be. You can normally tell when players lose trust and faith in a coach. You can normally see it. And at no point have I seen that yet under Mikel Arteta. So let's not even go down that road, which is sort of being talked about by some in the comment sections in recent days. Let's not even go down that road because I don't think we're at that point yet. It's not because I think he's untouchable and that he never makes any mistakes and that he can do no wrong. It's because I don't think we're at that point yet. So Mikel Merino, full of praise for his boss. Let's take a really, really short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the odds actually around this season's UEFA Champions League. We're going to talk about Arsenal's record against Spanish sides. We'll give you a little bit of context with regards to how Atleti's season's gone so far. I'll share with you a prediction, my team, and all the rest of it. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. Do not go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. If you haven't done so already and you're with us on YouTube right now, make sure you click that like button. It really, really does help. There's no reason why we shouldn't have at least 100 likes on the board by the time we wrap up the live stream. If you haven't done so already and you're what I call a freeloader because you're watching the channel without being subscribed, subscribe. That really, really does help. Check us out on Patreon as well if you'd like to go one further, and we'll bring you some sort of instant reaction in audio form only tonight from Emirates Stadium, because that's all I'm going to be able to do due to my work commitments. I did say to you guys about a week or so ago that where possible, I'll bring you instant reaction, but we're probably only going to be able to do that via audio just because, you know, it's difficult to get sort of video recorded, edited, cut up, put out very, very quickly while I'm working on the game. But I will put audio out. And so that is the biggest reason yet, I suppose, if you're a YouTube only subscriber, to come over and join us on Apple, Spotify, all major podcast stores. And you can sign up on Patreon as well, as I've already mentioned. Right. Let's talk a little bit about the odds around this season's Champions League, because this is interesting to me. Now, when I was doing my radio show yesterday, we do a segment because the show is sponsored by William Hill, and we bring on a representative from William Hill who talks us through all the latest odds and prices and all the rest of it. And one of my questions was, what are the odds around Arsenal and this UEFA Champions League? Who are the favourites and where do Arsenal rank in comparison? And I was actually quite surprised to hear that Arsenal are the second favourites to win this year's UEFA Champions League. Paris Saint-Germain, the holders, team that eliminated us from the semi-finals last season, they are joint favourites along with Lamine Yamal's Barcelona. But Arsenal come in second at, well, this was yesterday, at 6-1. That feels like quite a big price for a team that are ranked second favourites. I suppose the nature of the Champions League is quite unique, and maybe that plays a part in that. But if you are a betting man, and I'm not saying that you should go and bet if it's something that you don't do before people tell me I'm encouraging gambling, but if you are a betting man and you're interested, and I'm a bit of a betting man, I got to say, you know, when a price appeals to me, and I've got a little bit of disposable income, I don't like gamble my mortgage and all the rest of it, I will chuck a few quid on something. And I like this. I like that Arsenal are 6-1. So I might chuck a few quid on that. I thought that was really, really interesting. What's also interesting, if you're looking at angles for tonight's game, maybe from a betting perspective, but also from just a prediction perspective, Arsenal are on a 6-game winning streak against Spanish opposition. That is the best run that anybody in the Champions League has ever put together against Spanish opposition. So we're in a good spot with the Spaniards at the moment. Obviously, that very, very impressive overcoming of Real Madrid in last season's UEFA Champions League quarterfinals. You know, we've played Sevilla not so long ago. You know, we've got a really good run against Spanish opposition. Athletic Club just a few weeks back. How could I forget that one? So yeah, we're in a really good spot when it comes to Spanish opposition. Why is that? I hear you ask. Like, why is it? Is it because we've got a Spanish coach who understands, perhaps better than most, what the Spanish footballing philosophy entails, understands what Spanish football culture is all about, and is better equipped as a result of that to find solutions to the problems caused by Spanish opposition? It might be. It might be. I'm just trying to think about why it is. Is it that we're a better team than a lot of these teams right now? Yeah, obviously that plays a part. But I think Mikel Arteta would probably find it easier to prepare against Spanish opposition because of that background knowledge and understanding that he has, because of his connections in the game. I'm sure he picks up the phone and talks to people that are close to those clubs, that understand those clubs. I think Mikel Arteta is, as I say, is quite comfortable in preparing for these games. Whereas if you face an Italian team and you're not quite across Italian football culture the same, and you don't really know the players as much, and you don't really understand the coaches as much and their philosophies, that can be more difficult to prepare for, can't it? So I'm not saying that, Arteta's got this superpower over Spanish clubs. I actually think that tonight's going to be a really, really tough game, but I think having that background knowledge and that understanding, it will help. And obviously tonight, we also have the benefit of being able to tap into Andrea Berta for some insight, for some greater understanding of what it is that Atleti are and what they'll bring to the table, or maybe about the skill sets of some of the individual players, a lot of whom he would have brought to that club. He would have scouted extensively in the process whereby those players were recruited. So, yeah, and the thing is with Andrea Berta as well, like you look at a lot of these sporting directors and you look at them in a lot of cases and you go, he's just a guy in a suit who's really good with numbers and a very, very tough and good and accomplished negotiator. Andrea Berta strikes me as a football man. So if I was the head coach or the manager, I would probably trust Andrea Berta to provide me with that sort of insight more than I would most sporting directors. Does that make sense? In terms of Atleti's season so far, they're fourth in La Liga currently. They've only lost once in the league, which kind of backs up the point that I've made throughout this episode so far, that they are going to be stubborn, they are going to be well organized, they are going to be difficult to beat. But where they've fallen off a little bit and where they're kind of way behind at this stage in the season, both Barcelona and Real Madrid, is that they're not scoring enough goals. And that is mind-boggling, really, when you think about the fact that their front two are likely tonight to be Julian Alvarez, who I adore as a player and who I really wanted Arsenal to sign when we got wind of the fact that he was on his way out of Manchester City. I was saying, pay the money, don't care, really rate him, fantastic striker, go out and do the business. They've also got Antoine Griezmann as well, who again is a player that I've really, really rated for a really, really long time. Now, Griezmann, you could argue, is in the twilight of his career, but he's still a very, very effective footballer. So something's not really clicked for Atleti so far this season. Going forward, they've not quite been as efficient as we know they can be. But defensively, they've still got that organization, that nous, that tenacity that will serve them well, I'm sure, and make them very, very difficult opponents for us. In the Champions League so far, they obviously lost on match day 1 at Anfield. They were 2-0 down after like 6 or 7 minutes. And I remember turning the game over at that point thinking, I'm watching another one. And then on 81 minutes, I got a notification pop up on my phone saying it was 2-2. And I thought, wow. So I flicked it back over to that particular game. And then I watched Virgil van Dijk power home a header to win it for Liverpool. But that was during that run of games where Liverpool were winning, but not looking convincing. And I remember coming away from that and thinking, I'm not saying that I predicted Liverpool were going to lose 4 games in a row, but that was one of the games I looked at and I went, it's not all as it seems at Anfield right now. The only thing was, obviously, because of how highly I rate Atleti and how highly I rate Simeone and his ability to put together a game plan and then have his players go out and execute that, I thought maybe at the time I was being a little bit harsh on Liverpool in assuming that they were going to blow Atletico Madrid away. But in the second game, so on match day 2, Atleti did put a win on the board. They absolutely hammered Eintracht Frankfurt by 5-1. So that's put them their first 3 points on the board. What can we expect? Look, we can expect aggression, organization, tactical discipline, whatever their goal record says this season in comparison to the teams that they want to be competing with. Julian Alvarez and Antoine Griezmann, that is one hell of a front two if that's the way they go tonight. So, yeah, I'm wary and I will be very sort of mindful of the threat that they pose. And I think Arsenal need to be too, because they're not just sort of, Alvarez can be, quick. He can get in behind. Griezmann, not so quick these days, but technically sublime. They're both very, very cunning and clever players. And that's where Arsenal need to stay switched on. The big question then for Mikel Arteta and for everybody else is kind of of an Arsenal persuasion, of course, is to rotate or not to rotate. That is the question. Now, we've had a lot of discussions, I feel, about rotation in the last couple of months. What does rotation look like? How much should you rotate? What is too much in terms of the volume of players that you're changing from game to game? Who are the players that are just so important that you can't really rotate as often as you can some of the others? Who are the sort of more dispensable pieces and the indispensable pieces, I guess, of the jigsaw? I don't always think that when you're talking about rotation or you're talking about using your squad, it has to mean wholesale changes from the start of a game. I think it's about managing minutes. For instance, if Declan Rice was to play 60 minutes tonight rather than 90 minutes, I'd be quite happy with that because I'd be worried a little bit about his load. If there was a world in which we could do that with Martin Zubimendi, then again, that would work for me. If we could protect Bukayo Saka a little bit, maybe Victor Gyökeres, because he is playing every minute of every game right now because we just don't have another striker available. So those are the kind of decisions that Mikel has to make. But I go back to what I said really early on today's episode, which is in this league phase, is it not just better to get your job done and put yourself in a very strong position? There is always the risk that you do that. You play your first team, it still doesn't go the way that you want it to go. And then you end up later on having to use players that you hoped to be giving breathers in the last 2 or 3 games. Well, guess what? That just gives you further incentive, doesn't it, to go out and get the job done. So, yeah, there's risks to both approaches. The other risk is that you make lots and lots of changes. You weaken your side significantly as a result. You don't get the results that you want, and you end up fighting towards the end of the league phase for a place in the next round. I think we'll comfortably get through. I do. And so I'm not completely shut off and closed off to the idea of making some changes. But what would those changes be for me? Well, let me share with you guys my team today. So I would go David Raya in goal. I would go Timber, Saliba, and Gabriel across the back line, with Miles Lewis-Skelly coming in at left back to replace Ricardo Calafiori. I think that Calafiori was very, very effective again at Fulham, particularly in that first half. I like Ricardo Calafiori, but I also feel like Lewis-Skelly deserves his opportunity. So give him a game at left back. I think that's fine. I'd be more than happy to see Mikel make that change. I said to you guys earlier on that I thought Mikel Merino would play. So who's he going to play for? My midfield 3 would be tonight. And if I had to predict, I think this is what Mikel might go with. Zubimendi, Rice, and Merino. Now, I know that's a midfield that has been very, very controversial to a lot of people at the start of this season. But I'll explain why, for me, today, I think you could probably get away with that. We're going to face a low block. We're going to need creativity. We're going to need guile. But we're also going to need box crashers and people that can impact and influence the game that way. And I think that Mikel Merino can do that. Obviously, I'm taking the hint from the press conference as well as a suggestion that he might play. I've not taken Eberechi Eze out of my side, though, okay? I've not taken him out of my team. If we're going to face a side that sit deep, I don't think that Martinelli is going to be of much use. I don't think that Leandro Trossard, I do think that Leandro Trossard should get a bit of a breather. But I think that Eze will play. I would play him. I say I think he will play. I don't know if he'll play. I would play him from the left with the license to roam a little bit. And the reason he'll have that license is because I've picked a more functional midfield from a defensive standpoint. So Martinelli, maybe when the game is stretched. Trossard in a certain game state. I would play Eze from the left and I would play Saka from the right. And then I'd continue with Victor Gyökeres up front. I think this is going to be an attritional game. I think it's going to be dull at times to watch. I don't think it's going to be particularly exciting. And I know that if that is the way that this game pans out, there'll be a lot of people going, it's on Mikel because of his team selection, depending on what that is. But I think that's just exactly the type of game that we're going to get tonight. And whatever team you pick, you're going to have that same type of game. So I would pick this team. This is my 11. I just want to stress that, not the 11 that I'm predicting, but my 11, just to read it out once again for those of you listening on audio. Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and Lewis-Skelly across the back. My midfield trio is Zubimendi, Rice, and Merino. And then I'm going Saka wide right. I'm going Eze wide left. And I'm going Gyökeres through the middle. And in part, I've picked Eze wide left because I want to have another look at him there. I want to have another look at him. I want to see him when we've got lots of players in the midfield that can contribute defensively, starting from the left, but having that license to roam, to get close to Gyökeres, to maybe switch with Saka at times. So, yeah, I'm still figuring out Eza. We talked a lot about him on the post-Fulham pod, and we put a short out on YouTube yesterday and a clip on social media about my thoughts on Eze and why we probably didn't get anywhere close, in fact, to the maximum from him against Fulham. I'm interested to see him again playing out from that left-hand side. So let's see whether Mikel Arteta goes the same way and how that works out. I know there'll be a lot of people in the chat slating my team selection, but that's what I'm going with. That's what I'd go with tonight if I were Arsenal boss. That leaves me with just one thing to do now, and that is give you a prediction. And I'm going to go for a famous old 1-0 to the Arsenal. Set piece FC, ole ole, Mikel Merino from a corner. Arsenal 1, Atletico Madrid 0. That is my prediction for today's game. Thank you all so much for joining me, as always, on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. We'll be back tomorrow with a full pod looking back on the game. We'll also bring you some Patreon content tomorrow, as well as some audio-only reaction from Emirates Stadium tonight. So if you are a YouTube subscriber only, come over to Apple or Spotify or whatever your preferred podcast store is and get involved. You can also get involved via patreon.com/Chronicles of a Gooner. There'll be no ads and you'll get access to that exclusive content we've got coming your way tomorrow. If you are with us on YouTube, like the video, subscribe, and all the rest of it. And I will see you all on the other side. Up the Arsenal, and goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.